بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. So today is the second lesson on our Tadmuriyyah, and in the previous lesson we started going through this introduction by Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah in his Taqreeb, and what we managed to discuss in that lesson, the Sheikh basically explained that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he came with a complete and comprehensive guidance covering all affairs until even to the extent that even relieving oneself and all of those issues to do with eating, drinking, getting married, all of the adab, clothing and so on and so forth. He taught us all of those affairs, just as he taught us the affairs of worship, such as purification, prayer, fasting, charity, hajj, and so on and so forth. And also the affairs that we need in our interactions with creation, such as righteousness to parents, keeping the ties of kinship, good behavior with the neighbors, and so on and so forth. And also the transactions that we engage in, such as buying and selling and renting and leasing and so on and so forth. So the Shaykh made that point, saying that all of these affairs the Messenger explained in detail. However, there is something which underlies all of that, right? All of that returns back to something even more fundamental and more important. And that is the issue of what are we supposed to believe regarding Allah, His essence, His names, His attributes, His actions, and also all the affairs which emanate from that to do with His creation and His command, right? His creation is whatever He created of the ways and means, all of the created asbab and the ways and means, and likewise the created the created ways and means as one category, which is His creation, and then His command, which is His order and His prohibition, and this obviously is his legislation, which He reveals. And in both of these things, the Shaykh said that whether it's the creation or the command, we see far-reaching wisdom and we see mercy. And so this is the religion that the Sahaba took from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? This is the foundation of it all, Tawheed. Then he went on to explain that this all returns back to al-ithbat wa nafi. There are two basic foundations upon which this knowledge of Tawheed goes back to. So it's either affirming for Allah what is obligatory for Him in terms of His rububiyyah, uluhiyyah, asma'i wa sifat, and His actions, and negation of there being any partner who shares with Allah in any of these things. Right. Then the Shaykh mentioned how the Tabi'un, the students of the Sahaba, they took this, likewise the entire religion upon the foundation of Tawheed. They took it from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then after them, basically, in the time of the Tabi'in, who came after, there were generations that came. They either were blind to the truth or they pretended to be blind to the truth. And this was either due to a deficiency in their knowledge or not having the zeal and the desire to actually seek knowledge. Or it could be due to just transgression and oppression. Right? These are different ways that people swerved away from the truth. And finally, these people that the Shaykh spoke about, he said that they innovated into the deen of Allah that which is not from it, right? So due to their shortfall, their neglect, their ignorance, or their shortcoming in seeking knowledge, or to their transgression in those affairs, they ended up innovating into the deen of Allah in terms of the creed, in terms of worship, in terms of suluk, in terms of like behavior. And when they innovated these affairs, they then turned to the texts of the Qur'an and the Sunnah and began to distort them in order to support that which they innovated. Right? So this is where we reached last week in the introduction. So we're going to continue today, inshallah ta'ala, hopefully try to finish the rest of the introduction. And really what the Shaykh is doing here is just giving us like a history by quoting from the speech of Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah and Ibn al-Qayyim, and also from Ibn Hajar, just as a summarized history of what basically happened, after the time of the Sahaba and the Tabi'een, and how the Ummah split and how the various groups appeared. And then he will lead, from that into mentioning how Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah came rahimahullah, and he basically clarified these issues. So starting our lesson 2 from today then, قال الشيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية رحمه الله, Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah, he quotes from Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, who says, وَأَعْلَمْ أَنَّ عَامَةَ الْبِدَعِ المتعلق بالعلوم والعبادات إنما وقع في الأمة في أواخر خلافة الخلفاء الراشدين كما أخبر به النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم حيث قال من يعش منكم بعدي فسيرى اختلافا كثيرا فعليكم بسنتي وسنة الخلفاء الراشدين المهديين من بعدي. He said, know that the generality of the innovations, the general innovations which appeared, which are connected to the sciences, the Sharia sciences, the Sharia knowledge, and to acts of worship, they occurred at the end of the Khilafah of the rightly guided caliphs. Right? And so the period of the rightly guided caliphs is 30 years. 30 years from basically 632 to 662, but it's the first 30 years. So that would be from roughly 10 to 40 Hijrah in terms of the Islamic calendar. So at the end of that Khilafah of the rightly guided Khulafa, and the Messenger of Islam actually mentioned this. Then he mentioned the hadith, whoever amongst you lives for long will see great differences. So upon you is my sunnah and the sunnah of the rightly guided Khulafa who came after me. Right? And we know that to be 30 years, because that occurs in another text in which 30 years is specifically mentioned, that the Khilafah will last for 30 years, then there will be mulk, there will be kingship. So Ibn Taymiyyah continues and he says, فَلَمَّا ذَهَبَ دَوْلَةَ الخلفاء الراشدين وصار ملكا ظهر النقص في الأمراء فلا بد أن يظهر أيضا في أهل العلم والدين. So he said that when the dawla, the state, the khilafah of the rightly guided khulafa, which is Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman and Ali radiallahu anhum, and then it became a kingship, it turned into a kingship, then deficiency appeared among the rulers, and necessarily, by necessity, it would also appear amongst the people of knowledge and the people of religion. So on this sentence here, Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah himself has a commentary upon his own speech, so that we understand exactly what he means here. So the Shaykh says, commenting upon this, is that he says that he says here, how can it be possible that when deficiency appears amongst the rulers, deficiency also appears amongst the people of knowledge? And the Shaykh says that the scholars are of 3 categories. When we look at the scholars, there are 3 types of scholars. There is the alim of the dawla, which is the state scholar, and there is the alim of the ummah, right, which is the scholar of the ummah. And then thirdly, there is the alim of the millah, the scholar of the religion. Right? So he explains each of these three. The first scholar, the alim of the dawla, is the one who looks at what does the ruler want? What does the amir want? And when the amir wants something, this type of scholar will then go and find evidences from the book and the sunnah, and he will attach himself to kind of the ends of the texts, basically meaning that he will find what he desires and maybe divert and distort the texts so that it will agree with the desire of the ruler. Right? This is one type of scholar. So, for example, if the scholar wants music to be lawful, right, then if the ruler wants music to be lawful, then maybe there'll be a scholar who'll go in and who'll find evidences, right, to show that music is not unlawful. And if a ruler wants some type of transaction to be made lawful, maybe the scholar will go and find, so this is what Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen calls alimu dawlatin, right? This is the state scholar. The second type is alimu ummatin, the scholar of the ummah, with the meaning that this type of scholar, he looks at what is it that agrees with the people. What do people find agreeable? Irrespective of whether it's actually right or whether it's wrong. So, for example, the Shaykh gives an example. When he sees the people turning to music and pastimes, he will then say, "Oh, music is not haram." And when he sees that people have gone into transactions involving interest, he will say, "Well, these kind of usurious transactions, they're not really haram. As long as they don't comprise any oppression, they're not haram in themselves, right? These types of things." So in other words, whatever the people are going, whatever the people feel inclined towards, he will, find ways, or he will find texts, or he will basically, agree with them upon their desires, basically. So he says, فَعَالِمُ الْأُمَّةِ يَنْظُرُ مَاذَا تُرِيدُ الْأُمَّةِ. So whatever the ummah is seeking, the alim will go and give fatwa and give verdicts on that basis, and he will take liberties with the book and the sunnah as a result of that. The third one, though, is the alimu millah. This is the scholar of the religion, and he does not want except that the religion of Islam is established, and he is not concerned about whether the ruler is pleased or whether the society, meaning the subjects, are pleased. He's not looking at them too, unlike the first two type of scholars. Are they trying to please either the ruler, or they're trying to please the population, the general people? So this scholar is looking at establishing the religion, and he's only concerned with the pleasure of Allah Azza wa Jal, and he establishes the millah of Allah, meaning the religion of Allah. This is the true scholar. And the Shaykh goes on to ask another question, which is, again, on the speech of Ibn Taymiyyah's remark, which is that when deficiency appears amongst the rulers, then by necessity it will appear amongst the people of knowledge. He says, Shaykh says, if someone was to say, if deficiency appears amongst the rulers, then why do we say, as Ibn Taymiyyah said, that it must necessarily appear amongst the people of knowledge and the people of religion? Right? Why can't we just say, if the rulers have deficiency, then the people of knowledge will remain upright and the people of religion will remain upright? Why can't we say that? Why don't we say that? The Shaykh says this is because many of the scholars, of those who are among the scholars, they are, لأن كثيرا من العلماء من هو عالم دولة وليس عالم ملة. Many of the scholars are scholars of the state. They are not scholars of the religion. So meaning that he does what the state desires. And he may distort the text of the book and the Sunnah in order to please the state. So therefore, when the umara, when the hukam, they go, they have deficiency, Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen says, فَإِنَّ مِنَ الْعُلَمَاءِ مَنْ يَكُونُ تَبْعًا لَهُمْ. Right? That among the scholars are those who just simply follow in that direction. And he distorts the text of the book and the Sunnah in order to agree with the desires of those rulers. However, if those rulers were to be righteous, then no one would be able to oppose, if the scholars were to be righteous, then no one would be able to oppose their path, because he knows that if he was to oppose them, then they will basically punish him. Basically, the Shaykh is making the point that it is out of the fear of punishment that you find that many of those scholars of the state, that they will basically agree upon the way of the rulers. For this reason, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he said that when deficiency appears amongst the rulers, it will necessarily appear amongst the people of knowledge and religion. And he mentioned deficiency amongst the people of knowledge. He also mentioned the people of religion, meaning religiosity. What does this mean? He says that when you see deficiency in the rulers, they will not be concerned with speaking against the munkar, against the evil, enjoining the good, prohibiting the evil. And because the rulers won't do that, then amongst the people of religion will appear corruption. Right? There will appear corruption in the general worshippers in general. Right? They will enter into sins, they will enter into disobedience, they will disobey Allah, they will do that which is haram. And because the ruler, because of his deficiency, is not concerned with, al-amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar, then amongst the servants, eventually, you will start to see this appearing as well. So in other words, this is very, very insightful statement from Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, showing how things start, becoming corrupt, or how the affairs start overturning, starting with the ruler himself. And this can lead to the corruption of many of the scholars, and likewise the worshippers or the subjects or the servants as well. And the Shaykh goes on to say that from this point you will come to know that the rectification of the ummah is by the rectification of its rulers. So when the rulers are rectified, then the ummah will be rectified as well. And there has come a report or a narration. It's not an authentic hadith, but there's a report or a narration which is a word that is repeated. Kama takunun yuwalla alaykum. Just as you are, then the likes will be appointed as rulers over you, meaning that you will be ruled by people who are the same as you. So if you are sinful, disobedient, oppressive, then a ruler will be likewise over you, right? This is just simply from the laws and the justice of Allah in His creation, that this is how His creation operates, right? When the subjects manifest certain traits and qualities and behaviors of sin, oppression, innovation, misguidance, and so on and so forth, then they are given rulers that are basically just like them and behave with them in the same way. So the people, when they are oppressive, the Shaykh says, certain rulers will be imposed upon them, and when the rulers, there is deficiency within them in their religion, then that will also appear within the ummah as a consequence. And finally, the last part of what the Shaykh says is that most of the rulers, their weapons are the scholars, and this is why it's from the reality that you see that many of the scholars are scholars of the state. However, if all of the scholars agreed upon the truth, meaning that if there was general unity amongst all of the scholars, then it would not be possible for the rulers to oppose the scholars, right? So in other words, if there's consensus amongst all of the ulama, and they make it clear and plain that, for example, music is haram, riba is haram, and whatever other things, it's not possible then for the ruler to really oppose the ulama of his land, because there's no like opinion, there's no kind of isolated contrary opinion that one can hold on to or one can latch onto. So when the scholars agree upon the truth, the ruler cannot really oppose that. However, the Sheikh says you will find rulers who oppose the Sharia. With them, there are scholars who basically give them fatwa with what agrees with their desires. So this is something that Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen, rahimahullah ta'ala, has alluded to, explaining the statement of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah. The point being from here, the point that Ibn Taymiyyah is making is that in early Islamic history, when the rulership changed from the Khilafah to the Mulk, right, there was a naqs, there was like a deficiency that wasn't present with Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman and Ali radiallahu anhum. And that deficiency which appeared amongst the rulers in general, that deficiency which appeared amongst the rulers in general, that deficiency then in turn by necessity it will then appear amongst the rulers and also the subjects, right? And so therefore, as Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen mentioned, you will say there will be those scholars who will basically give fatwa to agree with the state. There will be those scholars who will give fatwa to agree with the sentiments of the people and the whims of the people. But there will always be those scholars who basically are scholars of the religion, and they say and give verdicts and speak with that which pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. After this, Shaykh al-Islam said that, he said, when it became a mulk, which is like a kingship, then deficiency appeared amongst the rulers, and by necessity it would also appear amongst the people of knowledge and religion. So therefore, at the end of the Khilafah of Ali radiyallahu anhu, this is right at the end of that 30-year period of the Khulafa, there appeared the two innovations of the Khawarij and the Rafidah. Right? So these are the two sects which appeared at the end of the Khilafah of Ali radiyallahu anhu. And what was the issue connected to? The issue was connected to rulership and the Khilafah, leadership and the Khilafah, and whatever was basically connected to that. So the Khawarij and the Rafidah, these two groups are on opposing sides, and the difference largely centers around Ali radiyallahu anhu. So one group exaggerated in Ali radiyallahu anhu, they allied with him and they exaggerated in him, and so these are the Shia and the Rafidah. And another group, they went to the other extreme and they declared Ali to be a disbeliever, to be a non-Muslim, right? They accused him of committing shirk and disbelief, and so they revolted and rebelled against him. So these two are on opposing sides in the issue of rulership and leadership, right? The Khawarij, who revolted against Ali on the issue of leadership, and they accused him of being a mushrik, a polytheist. And the Rafidah and the Shia, they exaggerated in him and supported him, and then they fell into many other evil doctrines after that as well. They claimed that Ali should have been the prophet, and Jibreel alayhi salam made a mistake. He brought the Qur'an to the wrong person. Some of them even went to the extreme that they turned Ali, they gave him divinity, right? They gave him divinity. And then they entered many other things into the religion. So the point being, at the end of that 30-year period, when we have the rightly guided Khulafa, which is the best rule after the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, after that the Messenger said there will be controversies, there will be differences. And with the change of the type of rule from Khilafah to Mulk, to kingship, there appears a deficiency. Right. Now at the beginning point of that rulership, the beginning part of that is actually mercy. As Ibn Taymiyyah says, وَكَانَ مُلْكُ مُعَاوِيَةً مُلْكًا وَرَحْمَةً. Right? So the rule of Muawiyah radiallahu anhu was a rule of mercy. And then when he went, then came the leadership of Yazid. And many tribulations occurred in the rulership of Yazid. Right? So this is where tribulations appeared. Yazid was not, a righteous person, and many tribulations appeared in his time, from the killing of Hussein in Iraq, and also there was a tribulation there was also the tribulation in Medina. There was a rebellion, and there was some fighting and killing involving some of the companions, Abdullah bin Zubayr radiallahu anhu. And then after that, Yazid passed away, and the Ummah then basically split. Ibn Zubayr was in the Hijaz, Hijaz region. Banu al-Hakam were there, split over in Sham, in Syria. Then another man came, Al-Mukhtar bin Abi Ubaid al-Thaqafi. He's a man who basically, again, he also revolted. He was a kadhab, he was a liar. And he revolted against the rule. So basically many other things happened, and this was whilst the bulk of the Sahaba had passed away and only a few of the Sahaba remained, right? So the bulk of the companions had passed away, and a few of the elderly companions such as Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu anhu, Abdullah bin Umar, Jabir bin Abdullah, Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, and others, these were the ones who basically remained and lived for a long time, a lengthy time. So they witnessed these trials and tribulations, the bid'ah of the Khawarij, of the Rafidah, and then the splitting of the Ummah which occurred. And then right at the very end of the time of the Sahaba, where there was still some Sahaba left, two new innovations appeared: the innovation of the Qadariyah and the innovation of the Murji'ah. Right. And their innovation, the innovation of the Qadariyah and the Murji'ah, obviously it was shown rejection by the Sahaba. Abdullah bin Umar showed rejection against the Qadariyah and likewise against the Murji'ah. On top of showing rejection against the Khawarij and the Rawafid. Right. So you can see these four groups, they appeared while there were still companions alive. The Khawarij, the Rafidah, who are on opposing ends. Then you've got the Qadariyah, and you have the Murji'ah. And notice also that the nature of these innovations of the Qadariyah and the Murji'ah are to do with the actions of the servants. Actions of the servants. So one group said that men create their own actions. We create our own actions, and Allah has no role in our actions. So in other words, basically they are claiming that there happens in Allah's creation that which Allah has no power over. Right? This is a statement of the Qadariyah. They deny al-Qadar. They deny that Allah is the one who wills, and the one who decrees, and the one who creates, and one who brings into existence everything, even the actions of the servants. Right? So this is the saying of the Qadariyah. They began to speak with this speech from the direction of Iraq, and this statement itself, it originates with the Christians. The Christians were upon this, on the issue of al-Qadr, and they took it from them. And also the bid'ah of the Murji'ah. What do the Murji'ah say? They say actions are not from faith. Actions are not from Imām. Right? Your faith is something that exists only in the heart. It's only in the heart. So in other words, you can be a perfect believer, you can be a complete perfect believer without doing any of the obligations. Without doing any obligation, you can be a perfect believer. And you can be a perfect believer while you commit all of the sins. Right? So the implication of this bid'ah of the Murji'ah is really to say that if you have one man who doesn't pray, doesn't fast, doesn't do the pilgrimage whilst having the means to do so, and he doesn't be righteous to his parents, and on top of that, he does all of the unlawful things. He drinks, he gambles, he cheats, he murders, he steals, and whatever. This man's iman is the same as the iman of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Right? This is the implication of this bid'ah, this innovation, this statement of the Murji'ah, right? That faith is only what is in the heart. And a person can be a perfect believer, a complete believer, without having done a single good deed. And his iman and the iman of Abu Bakr and Umar is exactly the same, right? And this, we know this to be clearly to be false. It is false and evil. And so Ibn Taymiyyah says, rahimahullah, that these two appeared at the end when there was a few of the Sahaba that remained, right? So they appeared at the end of the first century Hijrah, right? So we're talking, 70 Hijrah, 80 Hijrah, 90 Hijrah, right? That time period where the Qadariyyah and the Murji'ah basically appeared. And so they began to speak about these topics, these groups began to speak about, okay, who's a believer, and, who's a sinful person, and what is obedience, what is disobedience. These kind of issues, now controversy appeared because people began to speak about these subject matters on the basis of innovation and deviation, right? So, who can we label a believer? Who can we label a disbeliever? Who does a threat apply to? Who does a promise apply to, right? These are issues, because in the Qur'an, there are labels of belief and believer, and disbelief and disbeliever. And in the Qur'an, Allah makes threats, Allah makes promises. So discussion and controversy appeared as to, okay, well, to whom can we apply the label of a believer? Is it someone who just believes in the heart without doing any deeds? Whom can we apply the label of a disbeliever? If someone drinks or gambles, can we say he's a disbeliever? To whom does Allah's threat apply to? Right? The threat of hellfire and eternity in hellfire. Does it apply to a sinful person, or does it apply to an actual person of disbelief? Right? All of these controversies began to happen. They arose because people began to speak in these issues from ignorance, and they did not take knowledge from the companions. And ultimately, all of these statements and all of these schisms, basically, they have an origin which comes outside of Islam, right? So, the rejection of al-Qadr has its origin going back to the Christians, and the revolution against Uthman, first of all, radiallahu anhu, and then Ali, has its origins in Abdullah bin Saba al-Yahudi, right? And this is a topic in itself. We can trace all of these statements to people who are under the influence of other nations, other religions, other civilizations, because of mixing with them. Anyhow, the point being, right at the end of the time of the Sahaba, right, we see by that time these four innovations had appeared: the Khawarij, the Rafidah, the Qadariyyah, and the Murji'ah. And these controversies began to appear. However, even at this point, even at this stage, right, no one had really begun to speak about Allah Himself. Right, so the controversy about Allah, His names, His attributes, this hadn't really happened in the first century. No one had really spoken. As you've seen, the controversy, first of all, was about rulership and the Khilafah, right? And then it was about the actions of the servants, from the aspect of al-Qadr and from the aspect of Iman, right? So the Qadariyah said men create their own actions. The Murji'ah said, actions are not from faith. So Ibn Taymiyyah continues, and he says that they never spoke about their Lord and nor His attributes except at the end of the era of the minor tabi'een, right? So what is this time period? This time period is roughly 110, 120, 130 hijrah, right? Around that time period, and continuing onwards, going all the way to the 3rd century, right? So in that time period, this is when you start seeing people speaking about the attributes of Allah Azza wa Jal, right? So Ibn Taymiyyah then continues and he says that the majority of the Sahaba had passed away roughly after the time of the rightly guided Khulafa, and then there was just, a minority that remained. And most of the Tabi'een, they passed away at the end of the state of Bani Umayyah, which is around 130 Hijrah, right? So, in other words, Ibn Taymiyyah is giving us a chronology. The Sahaba, they lived, the last of them died roughly around 110 Hijrah, right? There's a companion who lived for close to 100 years. Then the bulk of the Tabi'een lived till around 120, 130 Hijrah, till they kind of mostly passed away. And then the Tabi'een, who are the students of the companions, they were present till the end, roughly the end, the middle to the end of the 2nd century after Hijrah. And so these 3 generations are the ones that we see, which are mentioned in the hadith. Khairul Qarni, Khairul Qurun, Qarni, the best of generations is my generation, then those who follow them, then those who follow them. Right? These are the 3 generations which are being spoken of. So he says that, he continues and he says that after this time, many of the rulers in the lands of the Muslims, they were from the foreigners, right? So they were not Arabs. They were from the A'ajim. And many of the affairs of the state and leadership and rule, it went out of the hands of the Arabs and it went to other people. And then certain books of the Persians, the Hindus, the Romans, they were translated into the Arabic language. And then those things which the Messenger of Allah ﷺ mentioned would happen, they began to happen. And one of those things is the spread of lying, right? Deliberate lying. He mentions the hadith, ثُمَّ يَفْشُ الْكَذِبِ حَتَّى يَشْهَدَ الرَّجُلُ وَلَا يُسْتَشْهَدْ وَيَحْلِفْ وَلَا يُسْتَحْلَفْ. So the Messenger said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in the hadith, that then lying will spread amongst the people until a man will give testimony even though he's not been asked to give testimony, and he will swear even though he's been not been asked to basically swear. So now, whereas honesty, truthfulness, being upright, these were traits that were inculcated by the guidance of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there came a point in time when that kind of standard of always speaking the truth and being truthful and being honest, which was still present amongst the people, it then began to be overturned until lying would become spread. Right? So this is something described by the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it is at this point, as Ibn Taymiyyah continues, حدث ثلاثة أشياء الرأي والكلام والتصوف. 3 things now appeared. 3 things now appeared in this time period that we are discussing, basically in the 2nd century after Hijrah. Right? In the bulk of the 2nd century. 3 things now appeared. 3 new things appeared. So remember, in the 1st century, what do we have? We have the 4 major innovations. The Khawarij, the Rafida, the Qadariyyah, and the Murji'ah. These are 4 major deviations which are to do with rule and rulership, and likewise our position towards the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, our position towards the rulers, likewise Qadar, and the actions, the Murji'ah, right? Actions and faith. All of these innovations have never ceased to be present in this ummah till this day. They're still present. So 3 additional things, or in fact, 5 things appeared. First of all, the first 3, ar-ra'i, wal-kalam, wat-tasawwuf. Al-ra'i, wal-kalam, wat-tasawwuf. These three things appeared. What are these three things? First of all, al-ra'i, which is the use of opinion to oppose the text. The use of opinion as opposed to the text. So you challenge the text. If there's a clear hadith on an issue, on an issue to do with ibadah, to do with, a worship or something like that, or a mu'amala or something like that, then you oppose it, you oppose it with your opinion. You oppose it with your opinion. And so this is Ar-Ra'i, and the reason why Ar-Ra'i appeared is because the Hanafis who followed Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, because he applied very strict criteria for the acceptance of hadith, very strict criteria for the acceptance of hadith, then it led to the excessive use of opinion, and especially amongst the followers of Abu Hanifa and Abu Yusuf, the followers who came afterwards. Whereas Abu Hanifa, his position was always to return back to the hadith. If my opinion opposes the hadith, then reject it and stick to the hadith. But the followers who came afterwards, they exaggerated in this issue of ra'i. So this is one trend which entered into the Muslim nation. The second trend is al-kalam, ilmul kalam. So this is basically the philosophy that was entered, and this is where they began to speak about Allah, His names, His attributes, under the influence of Greek philosophy, the language of Aristotle, the language of Plato, and the language of the Sabi'ah. And these are like a nation that were affected by the philosophy of the Greeks. So they entered this into Islam. And likewise, at-tasawwuf. At-tasawwuf is basically like the Sufism. This also entered into the Muslim Ummah, and particularly from the direction of the East, with connection to the Oriental, religions, Buddhism, mysticism, kind of spirituality type of thing. And especially in the eastern regions, there were certain cities that were known to be strongholds of these types of people, like Balkh, and other places like that. And it came from that direction. So these are three now additional trends or movements: al-ra'i, al-kalam, al-tasawwuf. And then two sects or two groups emerged also. The first are known as the Jahmiyyah. And so they are the ones who denied Allah's names and attributes and actions, right? Because they again under the influence of kalam and philosophy, right? So this is one side, and then the other side are those people who are the mushabbiha, the mumathila. They are the ones who basically resemble the attributes of Allah with those in His creation. So they are in opposite sides. One group negating names, attributes and actions, the other group exaggerating in the attributes and likening Allah's attributes to those of the creation. Okay, now you might ask a question, okay, what's the point in, why are we mentioning all of this, history, and looking at when did the Khawarij appear, when did the Rafida appear, when did the Qadariya appear, when did the Murji'a appear, right? Who were the individuals concerned, where did it come from? What did they say? Why did they say? What trends and movements? Why are we looking at all of this? Is it just like an academic exercise? Are we just there? What's the reason? In fact, Ibn Taymiyyah clarifies in a statement the tremendous importance of knowing these affairs, right? So he says, فَإِنَّ مَعْرِفَةَ أُصُولِ الْأَشْيَاءِ وَمَبَادِئِهَا ومعرفة الدين وأصله وأصل ما تولد فيه من أعظم العلوم نفعا. He said, indeed, knowledge of the foundations of all things, knowledge of the usul, the foundations and the underlying principles of all things, and knowing the religion and the foundation of the religion, and the foundation of everything which arises therein is from the greatest of the beneficial sciences. Is from the greatest of the beneficial sciences. Meaning that this knowledge is from the greatest types of knowledge, because we are basically going back, we are combining history, and we're combining sound understanding of the religion, and from that we're trying to understand why did this statement, why did this doctrine, why did this group appear, what were the reasons behind that, right? Because we are trying to understand the reason for the splitting of the Muslim Ummah. And without this knowledge, it is simply not possible to unite the Ummah, right? To bring the Ummah back to that which the Messenger was upon and what his companions were upon, right? Because remember, in the previous lesson, in the introduction, we also mentioned some brief words about true unity and a fake artificial type of unity. But the true unity is a unity that brings people back to the correct understanding, to what the companions were upon, before any of these schisms and isms and groups and parties, and before they appeared in the Ummah. As Imam Malik said, the latter part of this Muslim nation will not be rectified except by that which rectified its earlier part. Right? So if we truly want unity, and then this is how unity is basically brought about, right? And I also gave you the similitude. I said that if you have foundations for a building which are basically cracked in many different places, right? Then the first thing you would ask is, okay, why are these cracks here? Why is it cracked? What's the reason for this crack? Is it because underneath the earth is uneven? Is there some are there some big roots of some trees that were not really sufficiently removed? What's the reason? We need to understand why the cracks are there, and we need to lay the proper solid foundation without any cracks, right? So this is what we are doing here, right? We are looking at what are the true underlying causes of the cracking of the foundations, right? And if you were to apply this way of thinking in any other discipline, it makes total sense. You say that to a builder, he will say, yes, we have to understand why the foundations are cracked. You say that to a true physician, a true doctor, a doctor who looks at the underlying reasons and true causes of an illness. He will always ask, okay, we've got to understand why is this rash appearing? Why is this appearing? He will look at the true underlying causes, whereas the fake and the shallow doctor will just give you a lotion or a potion, and just give you a cream or something just to cover up and mask the symptoms, right? This is not a true doctor, right? So in every science, in every discipline, you would clearly understand this point, that you always look at the root causes of the problem and the issue, and you deal with that, right? So in exactly the same way, this is exactly what we are doing, right? We are understanding why are the hearts of the Muslims split, on what basis are they split, how did this actually happen in this Muslim nation, right? Why did this appear, what were the reasons why this appeared, what were these statements, where did they come from? Because we are trying to unravel and then treat this situation, right, with knowledge, with evidence, with right guidance. And so Ibn Taymiyyah says, فَإِنَّ مَعْرِفَةَ أُصُولِ الْأَشْيَاءِ وَمَبَادِئِهَا. This is a general principle, that to know the foundations and the underlying pillars of everything, of all types of things, and to know the religion from its foundation, and also the origin of everything which appeared in the religion, this is from the most beneficial types of sciences. And he says, for Iman, إذ المرء ما لم يحط علما بحقائق الأشياء التي يحتاج إليها يبقى في قلبه حسكة. Which he says, for this is because a man, for indeed a man, so long as he does not comprehend the knowledge of the reality of things which he is in need of, then in his heart there will remain a disturbance and a hesitation. and there will be doubt, right? So this is an extremely important statement from Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, which is that if you do not truly grasp the reality, that the knowledge of what you are in need of, your heart will always be basically in hesitation and will be disturbed, right? And again, this applies to everything. You know this from your own experience, in your day-to-day experience, right? If you want to invest in something, you don't have the right knowledge. Is this investment, is it a good one? Is it a bad one? This partner that I'm being involved in, is he reliable, not reliable? And you do not know the reality of all of these affairs, then you know that in your heart you're going to be hesitant, doubtful, unsure. You know, this is a nature with you know, all these things we know from our experience. And so likewise it applies also to the religion, and that's why those people who always have shubuhat, they have doubts, they have hesitation, right? It's the people who do not have ma'rifatu usul al-ashya wa mabadi'iha. They're the ones who do not know the foundations of things, the underlying principles of things, the reality of these things, right? These are the ones who basically are going to have wavering, hesitation, doubt, whatever. And so this shows that this type of knowledge that is being mentioned here, this is from the most beneficial types of sciences. Then we have the statement of Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala. So just to summarize then so far from the speech of Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, essentially what he's saying, that right, so to make this concrete in our minds, just to summarize the essence of what he said, basically with the change in rulership, with deficiency in rulership, by necessity there will appear a deficiency in the scholars and likewise in the subjects, right? This is by necessity, this will happen. And when these types of deficiencies happen, tribulations emerge, as tribulations did emerge in the time of Yazid bin Muawiyah, splitting tribulations, and then the innovations appeared also, the Qadariyah and the Murji'ah. And then in the 2nd century you have Ra'i and Kalam and Tasawwuf, you have the Jahum, which is Jahmiyyah, and you also have the Mushabbiha, Mumathila, and you see that these topics of the religion, whether it's to do with rulership, whether it's to do with the Sahaba, whether it's to do with actions, whether it's to do with worship, ibadah, piety, righteousness, tasawwuf, basically, which came along, or in relation to Allah's names and attributes. All of these appeared at a time when most of the Sahaba had passed away, right? So you've got the righteous leadership has gone, and you've got the righteous Sahaba have gone, and then tribulations, deviation, misguidance, even the splitting of the ummah from a political point of view, all of that happened after the time of the Khulafa, the rightly guided Khulafa, and the passing away of the bulk of the Sahaba, right? And this is where we start seeing all of these things. And so then the statement of Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, bid'atul qadar adrakat akhiru asr as-sahaba فأنكرها من كان منهم حيا كعبد الله بن عمر وابن عباس وأمثالهما رضي الله عنهم. He's basically describing how the innovation of Al-Qadr first of all appeared. It reached the time of the Sahaba, Abdullah bin Umar, Ibn Abbas. They rejected this innovation. Then the bid'ah of Al-Irja, which is expelling actions from Iman, this occurred after most of the Sahaba had basically passed away. And so then the senior amongst the Tabi'een, they spoke against it. Right? So this is now at the end of the 1st century. Then the bid'ah of Tajahhum, of Jahm bin Safwan, this appeared after most of the Tabi'een had passed away. So this is now 120 Hijrah, 130 Hijrah. And what happened is that with this innovation, it got out of control. This innovation of Jahm bin Safwan, it went out of control The rulers were affected with it. It spread across all of the ummah. And, until we reach the time of Imam Ahmad in the 3rd century. And then after that, after the 3rd century, there occurred the innovation of al-hulul. Now you can add another one to your list, right? Al-hulul. What is al-hulul? Al-hulul is basically where these people believe that they have, merged with Allah. They have, come into divine union with Allah. Right? People like Al-Hallaj. Al-Hallaj, he died in the year 309 Hijrah. This man, he used to say, Ana al-Haq. I am the truth. I am the truth. Right? And he came with a doctrine which basically means that Allah can merge with His creation and become one with His creation. He can indwell in His creation in certain people. This is hulul. And this now appeared in the 3rd century, 3rd or 4th century after Hijrah, after the time of Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah ta'ala. And so he says, right, so now you can see we've got basically to the 2nd, to the 3rd century and to the end of the 3rd century, and now we are seeing even more evil, repugnant, filthy doctrines entering into the Muslim nation. Right? These innovations of outright shirk and kufr, right? Of hulul and ittihad and eventually wahdatul wujud and things like that, things of that nature. Now, Ibn al-Qayyim says, however, so now we are really coming to like the context of this introduction. Ibn al-Qayyim says, وَكُلَّمَا أَظْهَرَ الشَّيْطَانِ بِدْعَةً مِنْ هَذِهِ الْبِدْعِ وَغَيْرِهَا أقام الله لها من حزبه وجنده من يردها ويحذر المسلمين منها نصيحة لله ولكتابه ولرسوله ولأهل الإسلام. Which means that every time Shaitan manifested an innovation amongst these innovations and other than them, Allah established from His party and from His soldiers, and from His party, one who would refute them, one who would reject them and refute them, and one who would warn the Muslims against them out of sincerity of purpose to Allah, to His book, to His messenger, and to the people of Islam. So meaning that despite all of this that we've mentioned of what happened in the 1st century, of the Khawarij, Rafida, Qadariyah, Murji'ah, in the 2nd century of Ar-Ra'i, Wal-Kalam, Wat-Tasawwuf, the bid'ah of the Jahmiyyah, the bid'ah of the Mumathila, Mushabbiha, and what happened afterwards as well of Hulul, Ittihad, Wahdatul Wujud, and all these other, like we said, schisms and isms and groups and which appeared. Never did this happen except that Allah established one from His party, from His soldiers, who would refute it and warn against it. That's why amongst the Sahaba were those who rejected Al-Qadr, amongst them were those who rejected the Rafida, amongst them were those who rejected the Murji'ah and so on and so forth. And likewise in the time of the Tabi'een were those who showed rejection against Al-Ja'ad and Al-Jaham and so on and so forth. This is like from the Sunnah of Allah Azza wa Jal. So he said, one who would refute them, reject them, warn the Muslims, doing so out of sincerity to Allah, to His book, to His messenger, and to the people of Islam in general. I think we still haven't finished the introduction, but we'll bring our lesson today to a close because we're coming to the end of the time. So really then today, what we've established today then is generally just build a framework of the first 3 or 4 centuries. Remember, Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah came in the 7th and the 8th century after Hijrah. Right? So this is all happening numerous centuries before Shaykhul Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah. And all these kind of different strands, different sects, different groups, different statements, they continued in the Ummah until they became established schools. Right? Because there appeared people who accepted these statements, developed these statements, refined these statements, tried to find arguments from the Qur'an and the Sunnah for these statements, distorted the text for these statements, established institutions right? These people were traveled to take knowledge, whatever, and then these innovations like became firmly kind of rooted and established, in the ummah, right? Just like you would find weeds which have been left for years and years, and they have roots which are feet deep, right? And they've just become established, right? In the same way, these innovations are present, and they've never ceased to be present throughout, the generations, throughout the centuries, up until this time of ours. So before we come to the time and the period of Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, which is 3 or 4 centuries afterwards, and obviously he is amongst those scholars whom Allah raised and established to speak about all these issues, right? Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he spoke about all these issues, clarified the truth, and established the truth. But today is just really to give you an idea, something that you should be familiar with. If someone says to you, okay, how, why did the ummah split? What's the reason? Who are the groups? You say, well, okay, in the first century, there was the Khawarij, and they say such and such, right? And there was the Rafida, and they say such and such. And then there was the Qadari, and they say such and such. And there was the Murji, they say such and such, right? At a basic level, you should know each of these groups, roughly when they appeared, what is their statement that they said, that opposes the Qur'an and the Sunnah. And then they appeared a ra'i, opinion, then kalam, and then tasawwuf, and then tajahhum, and then, whatever else. Like a basic general idea or a picture of how this Muslim nation, how it basically split, and that puts us in a position to then appreciate the discussion of these topics in a bit more detail, which is the issue of the sifat, the issue of the attributes, whereby we are going to resolve, inshallah ta'ala, the statement of all of these people, the Jahmiyyah, the Mu'tazila, the Ash'aris, the Maturidis, and the Falasifa, the philosophers, all of whom delved and wallowed in this topic, and went astray and innovated many evil, misguided statements. So really today is like a history lesson, and just building kind of really a framework, so we have a bird's eye view of the first 3 or 4 centuries, and one of those things is the issue of kalam, ilmul kalam, and Allah's names, Allah's attributes. That is going to be the subject of this book that we're going to focus in a bit more detail. So this is just like a general kind of overview of kind of general issues, inshallah. So we'll leave it there for today, inshallah ta'ala. We'll continue next week. Hopefully next week we will, inshallah, try to finish the introduction and then make a start on the actual text of the book, inshallah ta'ala, after that. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi